Chris Lang and Carrie Baris, welcome to Tongue Tied Ride and Tie Interviews.
Hello, thanks for
Hi.
having us. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is a little awkward for us because we're all really good friends, and we all really ought to be doing this all together someplace. We just couldn't do it together. Y'all are in Virginia, and I'm in Tennessee now. But I'm so glad we get to do this. You guys racked up superlatives in 2024, and I want to talk about those, and we're going to get to those. But you also are veteran ride and tie folk. Carrie, you're on the board, and actually the secretary of the board of directors. And so you have both of you have a good history with ride and tie. So tell me to begin with how you got first started in ride and tie.
Well, I'll go first since I got started first. And I think it was 2012. My sister had gotten into ride and tie, and she has a horse. And at the time, I did not, but we were both running a ton. And there was a ride and tie in at Biltmore, actually. And you can probably actually correct me on the year since you were also there. Um, but it was supposed to be at Biltmore, and then Biltmore flooded. And so they moved it to Clemson at the last minute. But Janice Helterbridle was looking for a partner. And my sister suggested me. And so Janice, wrote me in like she does so many other newbies. And so I did my first ride and tie at Clemson. And, my sister couldn't be there, which is why she had kind of put my name to Janice. And I remember that race. Some people who are still involved in ride and tie today are there. But, Janice, she gave me some pointers beforehand, but I remember walking to the start and asking her, wait, how fast do we go? Like,
Uh-huh.
do we walk? Do we trot? Do we canter the whole time? And she said, well, we mostly trot. And I was like, okay, I can handle that. But I was so focused beforehand on how to tie the rope than anything else. I remember being very concerned about tying the horse to a tree and it getting away. And that was my big concern because I'd never done that before. But we did a 30-mile race. So that was my testing ground. But, I was already training for a lot of longer distance stuff, running wise. I just hadn't been on a horse for that long in ever. So I remember afterwards, I only did the one race that year, but I remember afterwards stopping at the gas station to get gas, and like I couldn't physically get my legs out of the car. Like I had to pick them up and move them. I was so sore, and but I was hooked. The next season, a couple of people reached out to me about doing ride and ties, and then once you get into the family, you keep getting roped into more and more. So, but yeah, I think it was. Do you remember? Was it 2012 or 2013?
Either 13 or 14. I
Okay.
think it may have been 14, but it could have been, might have been 13.
Okay. So it's been about 10 years. I've been
Yeah.
involved about 10 years.
Um, and as we'll get to, you've done a whole lot, accomplished a whole lot in 10 years. And Chris, how you got into ride and tie?
I started in 2019, and I have to say, you calling me a veteran sounds weird or odd because a lot of I've made a lot of friends doing ride and tie, and all of you have been doing this a lot longer than I have. But in 2019, a friend of mine invited me to come try ride and tie. I was a runner and a triathlete and a cyclist at the time, and I did not grow up riding horses. I had one training ride before the race. And my memory from that race is, I'd learned the commands for, stop and walk and trot. I tried cantering during my training ride before the race, and that didn't go so well because I was squeezing with my legs to try to stay on the horse.
Yeah.
And, the horse was trying to go faster, and I was falling off. So I was pulling back on the reins, and you can take it from there. It was not a fun experience. So I decided I was just going to trot during the race. But I got very comfortable. The horse settled down, and it was the second loop or sometime later in the race that I let the horse canter, and it was so smooth, so much better than trotting. And I told my partner, why haven't we been cantering this whole time? But that race, it was at East Fork, and it was very hot that day, and it was a 35-mile championship race, and it turned out it was probably for the better that we went slowly in the beginning, because we outlasted the other teams and we actually won that first race.
Yeah.
So I did one more race that year, but ever since then, I guess I love running, but I didn't know that I love horses so much because I've just gotten into them.
Yeah.
But I do, and like Carrie said, I'm hooked. I now own a horse and I own a truck, and in a couple of weeks, Carrie and I are going to own a trailer. So
And we're going to get to that in a little bit.
the next big purchase is a farm.
Yep.
But just to say, I'm definitely hooked.
Yeah, yeah. And you are, I guess both of you are neat stories, but a little different. So some people come in to Ride and Die from the horse world, some from the running world. Carrie came in from the running world, but she already had the horse experience. And Carrie, I love watching you ride. I mean, every time I'm behind you, I'm trying to emulate you because you are such a good rider. And I know you had a lot of training growing up with all of that, but there are a lot of folks like Chris and me that had not ever been on a horse, or at least not for any kind of a race or anything until we got into it. And so it's kind of neat the different ways we all get involved. And Chris, you and me are the same, how we had no idea we would get hooked on horses. I had no idea that I would be living on a little horse farm, and then now you're looking for a horse farm. That was not part of my plan 12 or 13 years ago, not part of your plan just 5 or 6 years ago. But there we go. Well, you mentioned owning a horse, and as we get into 2024 and all of the things that you guys accomplished, I want to start with your horses. And so, Chris, I want to start with you. Your horse is Speedy Blue, and Speedy Blue is, and you didn't know this until a few minutes ago, but Speedy Blue won the Horse of the Year award for 2024. Had both the most miles, 365 miles, and the most points, 1,155 points. So tell us about Speedy Blue, and then maybe if you've got a story or two from this year about Speedy Blue, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, sure. So Speedy Blue, we just call him Blue. His first Ride and Tie season was last year, and he did just over 200 miles, which I thought was great for his first year. And he won the Freshman Horse of the Year through Sierra.
Yes.
I believe. Okay,
Yes,
thank you.
Sierra.
Yeah. And I was super proud. I did not know that he was the top horse in miles this year, which makes me even prouder. And he upped his miles from last year. So his second season, he did 330 miles or whatever you said.
365.
So 365. That's a lot of miles. But he's coming right along, and I have to say I've somewhat got lucky. I got a good horse. I have put a lot of time building up his endurance. His first season, he would get tired, and we do a lot of walking on the second loop of, some of the 25-mile distance races. But this year, and this leads me good into the story that I have, he has been getting much better at his endurance and not getting so tired on the second loop. And of course, that comes from training, but the races themselves are also part of his training. And so Iron Mountain this year was 3 days, and we had a group of riders and horses, and we were planning on using Blue for 2 of the days. Wasn't planning on using for 3, but one of the other horses came up lame on the first day. So Blue got subbed in, and he did 3 days, 25 miles, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in a row. And I wasn't sure how that was going to work out, but he did great. He didn't show any signs of getting too tired. Great vet scores, and blew me away. I just wasn't sure how that was going to go. And you telling me that he got horse of the year, just adds on to that. He's doing great. He's exceeding my expectations.
And that is the gray horse right behind you. That's a picture of Speedy Blue.
Yes.
And just real quick, I thought it was neat. Tell me the story about those 2 pictures.
So for Christmas, my mom took 2 photos that we had from races. So this was Blue's picture was from
Biltmore.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess we're going to talk about Comet. The Comet is Carrie's horse, and that picture was from Broxton. So my mom took 2 photos and had an artist paint our 2 horses.
That's great. That's great. So Comet is right there over Carrie's shoulder. Carrie, Comet this year was 5th in points and miles, but actually even more impressive, he earned the Ride and Die Horse of Distinction award this year, and that is an award that horses win over a career, accumulating points through a number of different ways, through miles, through races completed, through championships you've done. One of the ways you can rack up a number of points is having different distinct teams, and because we want to support the sport and encourage the sport. And I know Comet's done a lot of that. He's had who knows how many different teams he has been a part of. Tell me about Comet, and tell me a story or two from this year about Comet.
Well, I got Comet in March of 2019, and for those of you who don't know, he actually lives at Courtney's house. So I didn't think that horse ownership was something I could make work. I did ride and tie for several years as a horseless rider, and managed one season to get over 500 miles before I owned a horse. So, I was definitely getting around with different partners, and it was actually Courtney and Lee, Courtney's wife, who suggested, hey, I know you think you can't do this, but we think you can, and we want to help you. So Comet, lives with them. Once we kind of figured out, okay, this is how it will work. Lee said, I have a horse I want you to look at. And we went and looked at Comet. He was bred by Pam Burrows down in South Carolina, and he was 6 at the time. And so we went for one trial ride trail ride, and I did a little bit of arena work with him. And, I pretty much fell in love. And, afterwards, they always say, don't buy the first one you look at. And I did. And it worked out perfectly. He is, when we got him, we thought he was going to be a little bit more of like a chill, laid back guy. And he is to some extent, but he is a little, we call him a fire lizard on trail. He just is full of energy and loves to run. And he's one of those horses, you ask him to move and he does what you asked him forever. You ask him to try, he just keeps going. And that's what I love about him, is just he's so forward and he's got so much energy. And I think he's so much fun to ride, and he's fun, as you all know, around the farm. He's got a great personality. He's just over 14 hands. And so he really, even though he's a purebred Arabian, he's got a pony personality for sure, Yep. And he's just by far the most, pony horse that I've ridden in a long time, since I was a kid, probably. And I just love him to death. He's so much fun. I was just counting in my head, we're on our 6th season together, and he's come a long way. He really understands the game. People always ask, I don't know how your horse stays tied to a tree, not specifically my horse, but all horses. And I'm like, well, just watch Comet, because you'll see him at the start. He doesn't like to stand still. He's dancing around. He's always screaming, from the starting line, hollering to his buddies wherever they are. And he's just got all this energy. But the second you put him on trail, and this is what I really love about him, he just goes. And you tie him to a tree, and I mean, he's going to be hyped up the first couple times he's tied. But after that, he just settles in like, this is my job. I go down the trail, you tie me to a tree, and then someone will come get me. But I always think it's hilarious because he's always yelling, when he's out in the woods, and whether it's to us or other horses, I don't know, but it seems like it's to us, because if you're running towards him, he will, as soon as he sees you, he'll start whinnying. And I always think it's funny, like, hurry up, you're running so slow. And he actually did a lot of that at Ride in the Pines this December, the ride that we just did. I don't know, I'm sure we already had the man-woman title at that point, but it was kind of our final ride together for the season. And super fun ride. And, we had a few other teams out there with us. I know you were out there with Matt doing your 25 miler, but he did really well at that ride. And I was really proud of him, because We've had some struggles with him in the vet checks, all that energy, he doesn't tire out on the first loop. So he comes into the mid-race vet check and he's oftentimes like excited. He wants to go. And it's embarrassing. Like I'm like, no, I swear he's perfect on trail. And then he's dancing around, he's not like rearing up or doing anything super dangerous, but he just doesn't stand still. So anyway, it's tough. But at Ride in the Pines and the ride just before that, we took him to Broxton. He was great. He was wonderful in all the vet checks, and I was just so proud. And I hope that's the direction he's going. But it's so fun every ride we're on with him. I just have so much fun riding him because he just loves to go, and he seems to really enjoy being out there on the trail, and we just have so much fun really being able to race him. And we won our last race, so it's always exciting too.
Yeah, good.
And
And I will have to say how thankful I am that he made Horse of Distinction, because a couple of years ago we weren't sure he was going to make it at all. He nearly died, and so he's kind of the comeback kid as well.
Yeah, he is. That was super interesting. And I have the Krugers, I always say this, to thank for, really helping me save his life. Obviously I'm his owner, so the vet bills were on me, but they're the ones towing him back and forth. He had to go to the University of Tennessee multiple times over several months. And their daughter, Sarah Kruger, who was home at the time, became his daily nurse, giving him medication. But long story short, it was several months of just the vets saying to me, we've never seen this before. And you never want to hear that. And even towards the end, one vet said, I'm super hopeful this will work. And another one said, oh, I don't really have much hope that it's going to do anything. And he made it. That was 3 years ago at this point. And but he basically, what we think, and it's still a bit of a mystery, but that he probably inhaled something that became lodged in just in front of his guttural pouches, and that turned into an infection. And then he somehow got a fungal infection on top of that. So by the time we dealt with it, he was on antibiotics and antifungal. He had there was a mass growing in his throat, and it was closing off his airway. And at one point they told me it was cancer, and that's it, like, say your goodbyes. And then they did the biopsy and they were like, wait, it is not cancer. But in the process of that, they had given him a tracheotomy. So he had a hole in his neck, and it was actually, kind of funny when he finally got that hole cut, he could breathe again. So he suddenly had more energy, and, he was super sick for a long time. It all started with, he was kind of out, I think in the pasture, right? And he had a little bit of blood coming out of his nose. And then it turned into that was from the infection. And so, after several months of kind of going back and forth with the vets and figuring out what this was, because the fungal infection he tested positive for is super rare and not usually found where we live. And we hadn't been to any rides where it should be present. So he had to go on like a vaccine. He had to take an antifungal. He's on these antibiotics, and all of that finally, whatever mixture that was, it finally, fixed him. And there were a lot of bumps on the way, but he made it. And so for him to be out there being himself, sometimes his bad behavior, I'm like, well, you're not dead, so you can, I feel, I just am so happy that he made it through. That was definitely something I wouldn't wish on any horse owner, pet owner. It was a rough ride, but again, with the help of the Kruger family, he made it through. So,
and for those who haven't ever experienced this, when he had the tracheotomy and then he was just home and still had the hole there, and he would whinny and it would come out the hole. It was simultaneously hilarious and just so pathetic. This little whinny coming out of his neck. But as you said, all's well that ends well, and we are so thankful and so glad that he's now a horse of distinction, and he'll carry that forever. So that's great.